Senior Executive Director of Pharmacy, Laboratory, and Medical Research at Doylestown Health, to provide us answers to these questions. Dr. Roussel, welcome this morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to try and share my screen really quick so you guys can see the slides that I have for you. Okay. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for the introduction. I'm a pharmacist. But I also do a lot of different things, including oversee the laboratory and COVID testing, and then also drug therapy. So with that, I kind of wanted to introduce COVID vaccinations to you. But I think first will be a little helpful to start about understanding how viruses work. Viruses are a little bit different than bacteria. A virus will not grow on its own on a countertop. It needs a host cell. It needs to get inside a cell and then have the cell make copies of it. So when you look at a virus, it's got an envelope on it and it's got little prongs, spike proteins, if you will, and it latches onto cells to get inside. So looking at this, this is COVID, and all those little prongs that you see is how it gets inside. And then inside the virus is a little bit of genetic material. And it's that genetic material that we test for actually when we do a COVID test. And that's also the genetic material of how it will divide. And we'll utilize that in some of the ways that we vaccinate patients. So first, I want to just remind people, vaccines are wonderful. Humanity has really a lot to thank for them. When we think about smallpox, that's the oldest vaccine that we know of. And actually, thousands of years ago, the Chinese actually started with the first vaccinations where they would scratch people's skin and try and put a little bit of smallpox in it to stimulate an immune response to it. Fast forward, in the 1700s, we really started to test more of the smallpox vaccine, and it's been huge because we've been able to basically eliminate it. It's been eradicated since 1970s. Also, polio was another virus that really disfigured children throughout America and the world, and we were able to eliminate polio. Also, the last case of polio was in the 1970s. So as we look at all these common viruses, it is important. Vaccination is amazing, and our methods for vaccinating have evolved with time and become more effective and more selective. So what does a vaccine do? Basically, it mimics the target organism, so it could be for a bacteria or a virus, and stimulates your body to develop immune response. And when we talk about that target in our body sees something, they call it an antigen. That's the foreign material that our body responds to create that immune response. So first I want to talk a little bit about approval, and then I'll get into the exact mechanisms. So for any drug, they go through 4 phases of approval. The first is healthy people, small number, is it safe? The second phase, let's add more, right? And then we'll look at, is it safe, but also what's the right dose? It's a dose finding cohort. So you're looking to see if it works. And then really when you get to phase 3, it's hundreds of people and you're looking at efficacy and how is it gonna work? And so each of these vaccines move through all these phases just at a rapid pace. And then phase 4 is what we're in now, where the drug is approved for use in mass populations, but you're also monitoring for rare side effects to follow those people. So we have Operation Warp Speed, which is basically coordination. Let's get everybody on the same page for the same target. And this is important because normally when people go to get a drug approved, there's a lot of wait. Everyone wants their drug approved and every drug company wants it approved now. And so you can wait a significant period of time for your applications to be reviewed. And even priority review by the FDA is a process of 6 months to 1 year just waiting. And then once you've gotten your drug approved, then you figure out your manufacturing and scaling it up. And then you can wait up to 4 to 6 years to get somebody to come out and inspect your manufacturing facility before you can use those drugs. So in this case, what they did was they accelerated the phases by overlapping them. So normally where manufacturing on large scale would take usually about 1.5 years to get up and running, these companies took a major financial risk backed by our federal government, to start up the manufacturing facilities and get that up and running before the drug was even approved. So it's not a safety risk, but they did this in concert to cut that time down significantly. So I think people should feel confident that the FDA did a good job, full attention focused on these. It's just a matter of they got to cut every single line, including the time it takes to get review from the FDA and ACIP. ACIP was actually meeting on Sundays to review drugs, which is not usually what those entities do. So having said that, now let's talk about the type of vaccines. Now, most people have gotten a vaccine, and there's a lot of different types. The most common is an inactivated virus or a live attenuated. So they take the virus and they grow it, and then they purify it, and parts of it are given to humans. But to grow the virus, you need host cells. So they grow the virus in usually chicken eggs. That's why people are always worried about egg allergies. They collect the virus, and then the purification process of whether it's live attenuated or inactivated is a very long process, 6 months, to get that to its final form before it can be injected in people. So that's like MMR is live attenuated, flu and pneumococcal is usually inactivated. And then there's other ones where parts of it are taken, and they're conjugated with chemicals to make them more potent. But all of those utilize some part of the virus, and that takes significant time. So as science is constantly evolving, so too are our methods to vaccinate patients. And the two vaccine methods that we have in front of us are mRNA and then viral vector. And mRNA is different in that, and the same thing with, the viral vector. mRNA, they're not going to give us any part of that virus. They're going to get our body to make something to stimulate the immune response. So let's talk about mRNA first. Both Pfizer and Moderna are approved and available in the US, but they're approved through an emergency use authorization process, not the normal FDA approval process. So they're not FDA approved, but they are approved for use in this accelerated manner. So what does it mean? So in your body, you have a cell, and then you have a nucleus inside. So maybe I should not show you that picture yet. So you have a nucleus inside, and in your nucleus is where all your DNA is. And that's the map to your body. So when your body wants to make a protein, the DNA basically makes a little mold. I like to think about it as like an ice cube tray. And that mold is called mRNA. It leaves the nucleus and goes into the rest of the cell and starts making protein. And so that's a normal function of your body to take DNA and convert it to mRNA. But mRNA never enters the nucleus, it only leaves it. So when we talk about an mRNA vaccine, it can never affect your DNA. It won't go in the nucleus. It only works in the cytoplasm. And in this case, we take a vaccine and it's formulated in a little bit of fat. They're lipid nanoparticles, which are special. And that little piece of RNA, that genetic material, is injected into people. When it's injected, it has the ability to enter the cell, and it'll make the cell start making a protein that looks like the virus. And it's a small piece of protein. It's only to the spike protein, and that's what stimulates the immune response. And a whole cascade where they see that protein and your body makes antibodies. There's several cells involved in making antibodies, and I won't go into that for time, but they take that mRNA in your body, then your body makes that protein and stimulates the immune response. So it's a little bit different process, and it also takes time. It takes at least 2 weeks after the first dose before your body makes that immune response, because your body has to make the protein first. And even with that first dose, you're partially covered, but not fully covered. And then that second dose brings your efficacy up, because again, the body has a memory. So when it sees an organism more than once, it's like, okay, this one's important. I have to remember that. Same thing like people's faces. You may meet somebody once and you may remember them, but the second time you meet them, all right, now I got a face with the name, I won't forget them. So Moderna efficacy is listed about 94.5% and Pfizer's about 95%, but for developing severe disease. So they focused on, is somebody getting sick? So when they compared it, very low numbers of people getting sick in the group that actually received the drug versus more people who received the placebo got sick. And those who got sick with placebo got much more sick than those who got the vaccine. So I think it's important to know that when we talk about this, we're talking about decreased incidence of getting sick from COVID, not the number of people who had asymptomatic disease. Now, certainly that's being studied right now, and there is some data, and it looks like getting vaccinated does reduce your chance of asymptomatic disease, but it's not proven yet. And that's important because people who are vaccinated could possibly still transmit the virus to people who are not vaccinated if they were to get exposed. So I'm vaccinated, but I meet somebody who's sick with COVID. I'm not likely to get sick from it, but I could carry a little bit of virus over to my elderly mother and she might get sick. So that's what we don't know yet. Now, in terms of side effects, what we do know are these are the main things that people are experiencing. When you get an injection, your arm is sore. People being tired and having a headache are really the next most common thing. We hear about people having muscle aches, and I'll be honest, I've had both vaccines and I didn't have a single side effect. I was business as normal. The people who have stronger side effects are more rare, but some people can have muscle pain all over their bodies. People who have chills and fever, it usually does not last more than 6 hours per the studies and our experience with others. Now, viral vectors, less is known. So I don't have the good slides with the data because it's preclinical. It's not yet been emergency use authorization. So there's two. AstraZeneca is looking about 70% effective, which is decent considering that's still more effective than the flu vaccine. And they're doing studies about can they reduce the chances of passing on asymptomatic disease to others. Johnson & Johnson, which is also a viral vector, is running about 90% effective for the presence of antibodies. And that's at 1 month. And if you get out to 2 months, it's looking to be almost 100% effective for the presence of antibodies. So that's exciting, but that's not also the final data about how many people actually got sick. So I care about the presence of antibodies, but I really want to know the exact numbers of who actually got sick at the end. And that data is just not there yet. And with viral vectors, and I'm sorry, I thought I put a pretty picture in there for you, but I don't see it. What does that mean? It's different. So for a viral vector, you take a virus that's not known to be incredibly harmful and you make it do a job. And it acts basically as an envelope, and you put a little piece of nucleic acid, DNA-like material inside, and that's what the body responds to. So in a way, the viral vector kind of functions like that lipid nanoparticle and helps that genetic material get inside your cell. And then it will be able to produce that response. It is not known that there's two different types of viral vectors. Some are in cancer patients and they do affect DNA. These ones don't affect DNA. They don't integrate with the DNA. But again, that data is not published yet and they have not gotten EUA. So moving on, the next question is, oh, there's my picture. The next question is that everybody's asking is, when can I get vaccinated? And this was my presentation for you guys before we ended up having the announcement yesterday from our state. So the most recent announcement is, as of yesterday, those greater than 65 years old can all be eligible to get vaccinated today. Those 16 to 64 can get vaccinated if you're at high risk for illness if you were to get COVID, and that's the diseases that are listed here. But I think it's important to know that there's a line, there's a process. And so they're working really hard on allocating who gets to go first. So in our case, in our health system, we're opening vaccinations up to community starting the beginning of next week since this announcement came out. But how we're doing it is we're having the doctors pick their patients and refer them in because the doctors know who the sickest patients are. So it is happening now. It is happening very fast. I can't speak to every hospital in your county. I can only speak to what we're doing here. I'm not going to go through all the frequently asked questions because of time, but I want to let you know that I have them and I'll at least show you what's here about why I should get vaccinated. And that's there for you. And I've already kind of hit on how important it is and how your response to a vaccine is usually stronger than your actual response to getting the disease. And my big concern is that we don't know the long-term effects of COVID. And there could be concerning issues, especially in your pulmonary tissue. So I strongly recommend people think about vaccination. And also, the blood clots associated with COVID are very severe, and people should be aware of the risks that are with that. And then there's other questions about how are they developed? It won't alter my DNA. And you can get the vaccine even if you've had COVID. It's not an issue. You may have stronger side effects because your body remembers it, but there's no requirements, only that you are not currently with COVID or currently quarantined, that you could possibly spread the COVID vaccine when you go to get vaccinated. And with that, that was my 15 minutes, and I'll pass it back to the next person.
Thank you, Christine. Let me make sure I'm back on here. Yes, thank you, Christine. Wonderful presentation. Greatly appreciate you taking it all down and making it something that we could all comprehend. I did, before we move on, I talked about having questions at the end, but there's one here. I just want to make sure that we can address real quickly. So now that we're able to get the vaccine, how will we know which one we will get, and will we have a choice?
So it depends on where you go. The vaccines are allocated by the state. So sometimes I have Pfizer, sometimes I have Moderna, sometimes I have both. But we do not do, I know at my institution, and most people are the same, the day you do Moderna, you're only doing Moderna. And the day you do Pfizer, you kind of only do Pfizer. And then there's schedules. So I would say people can call around if they want. I think at this point, unfortunately, a lot of people are lucky if they get an appointment. I don't know if they really have the ability to choose. I know at our institution, some people wanted to wait to get a different vaccine, and I had a little bit of flexibility, but that's not always the case. So, and then with J&J, hopefully out by the end of next week, hopefully there's more options. But like when I think about, J&J, I think the best places for mass clinics, where you may not be able to get the people back. I know with our patient populations, we're trying to give them the 2-dose, so we know we can control that population a little bit. When I think about J&J with 1 dose, the first people I want to vaccinate are the homeless, because I may not see them again, that kind of scenario.
Thank you. So essentially the difference right now is the Moderna and Pfizer is the storage requirements, primarily because they're manufactured or produced the same way. Also, I do want to, Janet, who will be speaking with us in a little bit, has put a note about the available vaccinators in the chat. If you can take a look at that. And I also want to answer a couple questions. We are recording this session, so we will have it on our YouTube channel in the next day or so. And if you specifically want it, you can certainly email us and we'll send it to you. Otherwise, it is on the Chamber's YouTube channel for you to download. At this time, so now that the vaccine is here and employees are starting to have the opportunity to get it, as business owners and executives, how do we move forward regarding employment or employee policies? Ethan O'Shea, litigation and employment attorney for Hamburg, Rubin, Mullin, Maxwell, and Lupin, will speak to vaccinations in the workplace. Ethan?
Good morning. Thank you very much, and nice to be with everybody this morning. A few of you I know, many of you I don't, so interesting way to meet. Sign of the times, I suppose. Before I start talking about the legal issues pertaining to the vaccine specifically, I've talked to a number of folks over the past several weeks, couple of months, and invariably I get questions about, okay, vaccine aside, where do we stand now from a legal perspective? There's been so many orders that have been issued that have been rescinded. What are we allowed to do? What is the governor telling us to do? We're basically now where we were in very early November, before the governor ordered certain businesses closed and certain social restrictions leading into the holidays, and those have since been lifted as of January 4. The screen you're looking at now, I don't know if that link will work. It was designed to be a link, but that is the current order that is in place that directs businesses to what they're to be doing, what they should not be doing. But right now, from in the workplace, remote work is still mandatory if it's possible. Obviously, not everybody can be involved with working remotely. I see just from the screen, a lot of us are working remotely. So if you can, you're required to do it. Obviously, there's still a number of cleaning and mitigation protocols. One involves temperature screening. If you are open, your employees are supposed to be screened. before coming in. There's face covering, mask requirements, of course. That latest mask order is available through the state website if you want it. And also contact tracing. So if somebody at work tests positive, you are supposed to alert those who have been in close proximity. It's not through the state, it's an employer responsibility. That's just kind of a where we are before we get into the vaccinations, which are now obviously a hot topic. So if we can just continue with who is ever controlling it and continue still. I have had a lot of calls from clients that know what I do and who talk to me now and again when they've got their own HR issues about vaccination, because there's a lot to consider. And the first and foremost question is, okay, we have a vaccination that's now available. It's becoming more widely available to the general public as we go through this phased vaccination program. And the first question is, are we allowed to require our employees to get the vaccine in order to come to work? And the simple answer is yes. You are allowed to require that. Certain industries have been requiring their employees to get vaccines before COVID came along. For instance, a lot of medical providers make it mandatory that their employees get the flu shot every year, because they may be susceptible if they're treating patients who come in that are ill, or maybe they're treating patients that are at risk and you don't want to get your patients sick. So vaccination is permissible, but there are some exceptions, and it can't be uniform and required for everybody. And now we're talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act, commonly known as the ADA, and Title VII. Title VII is a law that was enacted in 1964 as part of the Civil Rights Act, and that protects people from race discrimination, religious discrimination, and things of that nature. And you must make exceptions under two scenarios if you're going to have a required vaccine policy. If somebody has a disabling health condition and might place them at higher risk to be vaccinated, they're not going to be required to receive the vaccine, and that creates its own issues because ADA compliance can be tricky with reasonable accommodation, undue hardships, direct threat exceptions. These are all kind of legalese under the ADA, but I think you simply need to know if somebody says, after you've enacted a mandatory vaccine program, if you choose to do that, and we'll talk about that in a minute, just know that you might have to consider an exception for certain people, and you don't have to be an expert in the ADA. And this isn't designed, this little 10-minute presentation isn't designed to make anybody an expert. It just needs to be on your mind so that you know to ask the question, to go to your HR person, if you have a regular attorney you deal with, if you have an HR consulting group, if you just want to ask around amongst yourselves, what can I do? Just know to ask the question. The other exception falls under Title VII. It's a religious exception. If somebody has a sincerely held religious belief that would prevent them from getting this vaccine or any vaccine, you have to honor that. Now, I don't know which religions or which sects of certain religions might lead somebody to say, no, I will not take a vaccine that violates my beliefs. I'm not sure what they are, but they're out there. And if that is true to a certain person, that person's not going to be required to get the vaccine. And if you take an adverse employment action against someone who is protected by the ADA or Title VII, you could run into a legal problem, and we certainly don't want that to happen for anybody. So if we can go on to the next, whoever is out there in the world controlling these slides. When we talk about the ADA, we're often talking about reasonable accommodations for somebody who does have a disability. And with amendments to the law about 7 or 8 years ago, it's now pretty simple for somebody to classify as a disabled person with a physical or mental impairment that impacts a daily life activity, and work can be such an activity. The simplest accommodation currently is remote work for people who are able to work remotely. Other accommodations can be, stricter mitigation, changing the office around. If somebody was out in a cubicle, maybe you can give them an office. If somebody is working 10 feet away from somebody, maybe they can work 30 feet away. Different shifts, things of that nature. You can deny an accommodation if it would cause an undue hardship, but there has to be a back and forth conversation with the employee to see what would work. And this is general to ADA law generally, not only to vaccines. But if somebody really has an ADA issue and you are going to mandate vaccines, you're going to have to sit down and say, okay, how can we accommodate their request to work without getting the vaccine? And it very well might be possible. So if we can continue. I've just given the real Reader's Digest version of the legal thoughts about a mandatory vaccine program. And I think, frankly, those are pretty easy to deal with. If we're going to mandate vaccines, I don't think it's going to be all that common for people to raise a true ADA or Title VII issue if they don't want to get it. I think the greater thinking that needs to be done is, from a practical standpoint, is this a good idea? Do you want to mandate a vaccine? The EEOC, that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that publishes guidelines, has basically said, yes, you can mandate vaccines with these exception employers, but the EEOC is not even really pushing it. The EEOC seems to suggest we want you to encourage employees to get the vaccines, but we're not really pushing that you mandate it. And there are a lot of issues to consider. And I'm not sure how much Dr. Roussel touched on it, but the vaccine, as I understand it, is not regularly FDA approved. It is kind of approved as an emergency. Is Dr. Roussel still with us? Because I'd be curious if she could touch on that for another 30 seconds and explain what the difference is. I'll give her about 5 seconds to see if she's going to jump in. But she's not. Okay. It's approved, it's ready, it's out there, but it's gone through this emergency protocol. And I know that my wife's company, she works for basically an insurance company that does have some contracting for healthcare, and they send nurses into homes in Philadelphia. My wife's company is not mandating the vaccine to its employees, even though they have employees dealing with vulnerable people in Philadelphia. And those people are at risk. The nurses who see them are at risk, but they're not mandating the vaccine because it didn't go through the regular FDA approval. So that's one consideration. Another consideration is it really going to be necessary for you, particularly if you're encouraging employees to get it, if you have a large percentage of your workforce that's going to get the vaccine anyway because they want it, they're anxious for it, how important is it to mandate it? And another question is, how many employees are going to refuse, and are they working together? What are you going to do if they do refuse? I had a client send me a note a few days ago. They have a workforce of about 30, and they took an involuntary poll, not an involuntary, an informal poll about how many of their employees would get the vaccine because they wanted to know, should we mandate it, should we not? They were going through this question. And of about 30, 22 said they're going to get the vaccine, and eight said they would not. And from what I understand, those 8 said they really were going to resist, even if the employer required them to do it. Now, that would put the employer in a bind. If you're going to mandate the vaccine, you have to think about, what are you going to do if employees refuse? Are you going to suspend them? Are you going to terminate them for violating a policy? What's that going to do to your workforce? What's that going to do if you have other employees who violate other policies, but you're not taking the same disciplinary action against them? For instance, put somebody into a bunch of categories. You have an older African-American female employee who refuses to get the vaccine. Now you terminate that employee. But you have a young white man who violates some other policy, and you don't take such an extreme action. Now you may subject yourself to a disparate treatment claim and a discrimination claim. Another question you have to ask yourselves are, what are the risks? There is the remote possibility of somebody trying to impose liability against an employer for mandating a vaccine if the person suffers a significant adverse reaction to that vaccine. I think that is a very, very slim possibility, but I know employers are thinking about it. But weigh that against the risk of somebody getting sick from COVID because you've not required folks to get vaccinated. Are you going to face a claim because you allow people to come to work without requiring them to get vaccinated? So there's a lot of pros and cons. And bear in mind, if you're going to require the vaccine, you are likely going to have to give folks time off to get the vaccine, pay them for that time off, and pay for the vaccine itself. So there could be a cost factor. For those who might have unions, this is almost certainly going to be something that would have to be collectively bargained. Take a look at your contract if you have a collective bargaining agreement, but it's very likely that it will not be mandated unless the union's going to agree to it. So there's a lot to think about. Next, please. I think I alluded to this a minute ago. The EEOC seems to be suggesting that employers encourage its employees to get the vaccines rather than require it. And that seems to be what most are doing. I've only heard from 1 or 2 employers that really seem to be leaning toward a mandatory policy if they've not enacted it already. But certainly you can encourage employees to get the vaccine. And I read an article just the other day, a large national company is encouraging it to the point that they're giving employees paid time off to get it, even though it's not mandatory. So they're saying, I don't recall whether it was 2 hours or 4 hours, but take a half day on the clock on us and go get your vaccine. So the employers are thinking it's important enough for them to do that, and you can encourage it in different ways. Next, please. This slide is vaccine related, but it's really more COVID related. And I've gotten a lot of questions over the past couple of months. What happens if somebody refuses to work? And now the question is, what happens if somebody refuses to get the vaccine and refuses to work? Well, assuming you don't have a vaccine policy that requires it, it's basically now an ADA question. If somebody's just nervous about working in COVID, the law does not provide that person with protection. If somebody has somebody at home with a health condition, they live with a parent, they live with a very ill spouse, that is likewise not enough to say, I'm not coming to work, I'm nervous about COVID. But if somebody has an underlying health condition that places them at greater risk to contracting COVID, now we have to start talking about, can we accommodate that person? If they haven't been working from home remotely already, maybe an accommodation is to allow them to work remotely. Can they switch their shift? Can they take a little bit of unpaid time off? Sometimes an accommodation that's required under the ADA is a short period of unpaid leave. So these are all interrelated, and they become very interesting because this is a situation we all hear when science is ahead of the law. In this case, the pandemic has been ahead of the law, and there weren't a lot of concrete answers to some of these questions. Further, I think we have perhaps a last slide coming. No, that was the last slide. So I'll turn it over to Pam. Certainly, if anybody has any questions, we can address them here. You can contact me or anybody else who you might need to, or visit our resource center. There's certainly plenty of literature to be found. But thank you.
Great, thank you, Ethan. Such an important part of this discussion as business owners and leadership teams for our members to really kind of get our hands around how we can manage this as we move forward. There was one question, you partially answered it, but this one had a specific component, so I wanted to make sure it was addressed. So you did indicate that rewards could be offered to persons who get the vaccine. So this one, for example, was, can a home health care agency give preference to staff that have been immunized?
Yeah, as long as you're not discriminating against anybody for a protected category, you can do whatever you want. So that would be one sort of reward. If you get the vaccine, you have a preference for this, whether it's a monetary preference, time off preference, shift preference. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you are not treating people differently because of age, race, religion, disability, you're free to do what you like.
Good to know. Thank you. And again, if anyone has any questions, Ethan's information is there, and we'll have the recording. So if you don't get it down, you can check through. So Dr. Roussel shared now the updated as of yesterday who now qualifies for the vaccine, but when and where will we be able to get it? Janet Panning, Interim Administrator for the Office of Public Health for Montgomery County, is going to provide us with the latest information related to Montgomery County. So welcome, Janet.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you for Christine and Ethan for those informative presentations. I also have one of our nurse experts with me today, Mira Singer, who will speak up as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about our county process. Hi, Mira, I see you now. And then we'll be open to questions as well. First of all, the county has been immunizing community members since the week before, I think starting December 28th. And we are immunizing about 5,000 people a week. We started in the original phase 1A to immunize healthcare workers. We have a pre-registration process on our website. So I typed in our website link into the chat box. If you go to that link and click on vaccine information, that will take you to 2 pre-registration surveys. The first one is for businesses, and the second one is for individuals. First of all, we were collecting business information for the large number of businesses that are in phase 1B. Right now, we're only immunizing 1A, and we were hoping to get through the healthcare workers in 1A by the end of January or mid-February. As of yesterday, with the new additions to phase 1A, people over 65 or people under 65 that have a health condition, people that are in the original phase 1B now are behind approximately 200,000 people that weren't behind prior to yesterday. That means that if you are in phase 1B as an employer, you might do yourselves a favor by looking at your staff rules and inviting anybody that's eligible for the new phase 1A, people over 65 or people 65 or younger that have one of the healthcare conditions, to get in line for a vaccine someplace. We are working with RSVP and our senior services to identify solutions for persons that are technologically unable to do the pre-registration survey. We're probably going to do some clinics at senior centers, et cetera, but those details have not been figured out yet. So currently, if you want to get in line for a county vaccine, you do one of the pre-registration surveys. Those are reviewed by our clinical team, and then we will send out links as vaccine becomes available. We hope to increase our number of doses. We hope to get more vaccine from the state. We're working in close partnership with the state. Starting February 3rd, we will be opening our clinic at Doylestown High School. We currently are at the community college, but starting the week of February 3rd, we'll be doing about 5,000 second doses a week. And then we'll be doing hopefully 5,000 initial doses a week. So we hope to double our capacity. Mira, what do you have to add? I know a lot. I'm going to ask you if you have comments that you'd like to make.
Well, since we've started the clinics at the Montgomery County Community College, and additionally, we before we started the community college, we were at the through the EOC and public safety. We were vaccinating the first responders, paramedics, kind of in a sense as like our first trial before we went out to the public, and that was very successful. And it was on a much smaller scale, so we could, as nurses, get used to what the flow is going to be. In terms of administering the vaccine, it's pretty basic for us, but of course it was getting used to not just administering the vaccine and we are used to doing large scale vaccination clinics because we've been doing this for many, many years with our flu vaccine initiative. But of course, just the everything that goes along with this vaccine, there's so many unknowns and so many questions and concerns. I mean, I'm sure everybody, is aware of all the media and what people are feeling about the vaccine and the hesitation. And so, we had to be prepared for that. There was a whole other element. It wasn't just administering a vaccine. It was getting used to a new system for entering the vaccine into a database called PrepMod, which the state of Pennsylvania created, and that's the database that we have to use. So getting used to that and essentially training ourselves on it. And, we're still a little bit bumpy with it. There are still some questions we have about the system. It's not the easiest to use, honestly. But all of these things compounded made it a completely different type of vaccine clinic that we're used to. But that being said, having done this for a few weeks already, it seems that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the public who, has been able to attend in, Group 1A, the healthcare workers. Understandably, as Janet was saying, with people who are now the 65 and older and the under 65 who have health conditions who can now come to the clinic and are very anxious to come to the clinic. We've had a lot of people just show up to the community college without appointments saying, we were hoping that maybe at the end of the clinic you'd have leftover doses, because you read that about that a lot across the country, people waiting, like camping out overnight in parking lots, or, waiting 10 hours in line, hoping to get, the remnants of, whatever's left over from a clinic. We're very controlled with it. We don't have lines that are 2 miles long. It is very controlled, and we have gotten a lot of positive feedback about it. Understandably, people who have not been able to get the vaccine yet, who are very frustrated, as this is across the country, it is a very frustrating process, but be rest assured that everybody will be able to get the vaccine in time.
I would like to thank you, Mira, for sharing that. And I would like to echo what she said about vaccine becoming more available in the next few weeks. Our website has a link to the locations in the county. If you go to the website that I put in the chat box and scroll down, you'll see both the map and information on the providers of the current providers of vaccine. And that's updated regularly as more and more vaccine becomes available to multiple pharmacies. We are checking, as Mira alluded to, at the door to make sure people have appointments. If people say that they're under 65 with a health condition, they're required to sign an attestation that they in fact have a health condition. People that are over 65 have to show proof of age, etc. So we are checking, and we're turning people away because we've had a lot of people that have shared the links. We'll send them to certain groups, and then they'll get passed around. So we have been required to check at the door and turn people away that do not fit the specific phase that we're in. But soon everybody will get vaccinated. We think that by April or so, there'll be enough vaccine so that anybody who wants it will be able to get a vaccine. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Janet, that is great to know. So one of the questions that actually just popped up is, when will healthy working adult be eligible? So you're suggesting perhaps April, May?
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, who knows when the vaccine will actually be out there, but we know that it's becoming more and more frequent each week.
And so I guess that assuming that the Johnson & Johnson product comes out relatively quickly, that will probably help move things along since it's a one dose. And
Absolutely.
So we won't have to worry about bringing people back. Let me just see, there was a couple others. Oh, and I'm not sure if I missed it, but once folks are registering on your site for the vaccine, they qualify. Do you have a sense now of the turnaround time from when they register to when they're getting the call or the ability?
Well, we have 80,000 people that have pre-registered, and we're giving out 5,000 doses a week.
It's a little while.
I'm afraid to do the math.
Yeah.
So I would try multiple options.
Okay, and that is from that list that you have. Someone has just mentioned that the ones are saying that they're either full or they don't have any doses. So I guess you just really need to keep trying. There is one question. So I'm a director of a child welfare agency. Do home visits to foster, and they do home visits to foster parents. Seems like they should be in group 1B, but it's not clear. How can someone find out if they feel their group is not listed there clearly?
I sent Pam, I think, an email to you this morning that has links to the state guidance as well as to our website. We're trying to keep our website updated, but there may be some clarification on both our website and then the links to the State Department of Health website about which groups are included in which phases. But again, anybody that is wondering if they're in 1B should check to see if they have any staff that now fit into 1A that can jump the line, because 1B will be a long time from now because of the 100,000 people that are now in 1A.
There's another, for someone someone under 65 with a health condition that signed up last week, but is now in the 1A group. Do they need to register again to get their elevation from 1B to 1A?
No, we do that with our clinical team in the database.
And Dan, I'm not quite sure your question. Dan Cook was, will that include children? Were you talking about the foster children or just when will children get it? I don't know, Dan, are you able to unmute and just ask? Because I want to make sure I can get your question addressed.
Well, let me add that Moderna is only available for 18.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, at what point do you think the vaccine will be ready for children? I know you had mentioned like May or April.
Currently, Moderna is only available for people 18 and older. Pfizer, Mary, you can help me out here, I think is 16 and older.
16, yeah, it's not, neither of them, at least at this point to our knowledge, are we can only do it for 18 and up for Moderna. And right now we don't have Pfizer, but if and when that does happen, Pfizer's only 16 and up. So it's not available for under those age groups, unless, obviously the studies change and it generally it's really because the children under those ages were not included. So, who knows? It might be safe, but it's not, there's no emergency use approval for children under those age groups.
There's one other question. So specific to one of our retirement communities, Arbor Square, Mimi Kean is asking, would the county come to this, their facility to vaccinate the seniors? There's 259 seniors in independent living. So how will these folks that aren't able to get to a location be able to get vaccinated, or how are they now? Do you know?
I don't have an answer for that. We're in conversation with our senior services and some other groups about whether we will do locations at senior centers. So I don't know what the answer to that is at this time, but we hope to have, we believe that in the county, eventually there'll be more on-site clinics, but I don't have a specific answer to that at this time.
And would you post that on your site once that
absolutely.
The policy is available? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because these folks aren't able to get out they qualify certainly today, but aren't able to get to any of the locations, whether yours or the pharmacy. So again, this, we have, Ethan is still here. And just if there's any last question before we wrap it up, I'd like to make sure we honor the commitment of your time for an hour. I thank you, Ethan, Janet, Mary, and also Dr. Roussel for being part of this presentation. Great information. I think that it really kind of makes us feel a little bit better about the vaccine, our legal opportunities here, and also where and potentially when we can get it. So we will have, as I said, we will have the recording on our YouTube channel a little bit later, either today or tomorrow. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, let us know. We'd be happy to help direct you. So thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you again at an event soon. And very, very soon as possible, we can see you live. So have a great day and stay safe. We'll see you soon.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.